Did you know that post-secondary youth with disabilities have a harder time getting a job than their peers? Let's help break down the barriers by taking the Youth Leadership Initiative survey at disabilityfoundation.org/YLI.
You're listening to Discover Stories on Reimagine Radio. My name is Bryden Vino, and I'm the program coordinator with the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Today, I'll be speaking with Amy Amantea, the Vocal Eye Community Outreach Coordinator. She'll be sharing some life experiences, like acting with sight loss and even flying a plane. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Amy Amantea, who is the Vocal Eye Community Outreach Coordinator. Welcome to Discover Stories, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so maybe let's just start out with a bit of, what are your passions in life and how have they affected what you've done as a career?
Gosh, I always as a small child wanted to be an actor. My parents had enrolled me in some acting classes and performance stuff from the time I was, I want to say like 7 or 8, like quite young. And I had grown up with this dream of being an actor and a performer. So I studied that quite intensely. And then at the age of 24, I experienced a loss of my sight. So I had to reinvent myself pretty much. And for me, I still had the passion of being an actor. But in the beginning, I thought to myself, how would I do that, right? Like, how would I navigate a stage or hit my marks or access a script? And who would want a blind actor? And I think that that's probably something that likely folks who experience some kind of disability later in life, we always compare before and after. But it wasn't until I started to connect with the disability community that I was like, wait a second, there are other people doing this. I can do this too. Like, this is not a big deal. Sight loss is inconvenient, but for me, it's not terminal. And it's really just about making a decision to go for the things that you want. And that maybe is an oversimplification, but for me, that's the choice I had to make.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's interesting. You brought one of those things up, hitting the marks. I was so curious about that. Because there are definitely opportunities for people with disabilities in film and TV, but you have to go a little further and think, what are the challenges? And so how have you kind of made that space accessible to yourself? Like, what is maybe your routine when you get to a new stage?
Well, first off, I need to make sure I can get an accessible script, which for me looks like a plain Word document. So not a PDF, but something that I can manipulate, so I can change the size of the font, the format, and that if I want to print it out, I can do that. Although I have to be honest with you, when I print out a script, I literally kill a forest because it's so many pages.
I was about to say, It's got to be a thick book. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do my best to only print out the sides that have my particular lines on them. And then everything else can be sort of in, I suppose, average size print for sighted folks, but my print would be like a 50 font. So my scripts look like 12 point for everybody else. And then, there's Amy's lines. Yeah. They're going to be 50 font to try and reduce the number of pages. And then once I get on set, the idea is that rehearsal becomes, in that process, you kind of become, you develop a vocabulary, I guess, with your body, and things become very routine. And that's the idea of rehearsal. You do it over and over and over and over and over and over again until you can do it pretty much with your eyes closed and without thinking about what you're doing, because it's really hard to walk and talk at the same time. So for me, I can access tactile marks on a stage. So that might look like, like a wooden ruler or a wooden paint stir stick that you get from the hardware store.
Yeah.
I can put those on the ground and then cover them with black tape. And so they're not necessarily seen by anybody else, but I can feel it under my feet when I hit the mark.
Oh, that's so smart.
So that becomes, and there's so many other, like you can use weather stripping. You can use, like, there's just about anything you can use. And I could put weather stripping like against the wall again and cover it with black tape. And So there's all sorts of tactile things that I utilize, and it just depends on which stage and what the stage decor is and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but it's kind of fun when you get on stage to think about, okay, for this show, you know, what am I going to use? Because it could be I could have very different needs than the last show. And that, you know, it could depend on, you know, where the lighting is and what the sounds are happening in the space and what activity I am asked to do as an actor. Right. And that could all change the recipe for what I know works.
Right. You know, what I love about that is how simple the solution is to,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like you said, just a ruler or a paint stick just right on the ground. It's funny how my initial thought was, oh, there's got to be all these different ways of making the stage more accessible, and then you just say paint stick, and I go, oh,
yeah,
it's just that easy. Yeah.
And that's the great conversation that I get to have when I go into an audition. And sometimes directors say, well, how could we best support you if you were to get the role? And I say, listen, it's literally as easy as this. Mm-hmm. Right? Like there are a few things, and sometimes I can't predict what those things are going to be, but really in terms of navigation, I've kind of honed that skill to be able to say, I got this. So please, you know, and I think that that's probably a fear for just about anybody with a disability going into an audition is, you know, are they going to think I'm too much trouble? I'm too much work. Right. And if you can come prepared with ways of saying, you know, these are the three things that'll really help me in this situation: accessible script, maybe a sighted guide and a blackout, and, you know, a paint stir stick and some gaff tape.
Yeah.
I'm good to go. Right.
That's interesting. Your solution there is very specific to that industry, but you could open that up to any person with any disability looking to get a job, right?
You know, even when you're doing film and television work, oftentimes sighted, able-bodied actors are walking and talking, and they have to hit a mark on the ground. And sometimes it's a sandbag at your feet. And it's like, when you hit the sandbag, you know, you're at your mark. And so everybody is doing this to some degree, right? Everybody is figuring out ways of finding their marks. And that is no different than any of us that live with disability that are also trying to navigate a stage or, you know, a set of any kind.
Right. That reminds me of a quote from an earlier podcast I was able to do with Terry Sleva. She's from Regina, Saskatchewan. And she said, people with disabilities are people first.
Yes.
And right. I mean,
yes.
Like you said, there's sighted, able-bodied people that use a sandbag. That's arguably more than what you use as a paint stick, right?
Yes, arguably it is.
So yeah.
And arguably I would say that some of those folks who have to find their marks without using their direct line of sight, because right, you're like looking at the other actor, right? You gotta keep focus on them. That sighted folks have a real hard time doing that. And so maybe to some extent I have an advantage.
Totally. It's the curse of taking things for granted, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I heard that you flew a plane.
Somebody did their Google research. Yeah.
Perhaps.
I flew a plane out in, gosh, you're really asking me to tap into my memory here. Out in Surrey, I think it was in Surrey area. And they were these little ultra glide 2-seater airplanes. And it was really, really early in my sight loss journey. And I just wanted to get out and do something. And actually it was one of those, it was something that a dating profile was putting on, and I wasn't interested in going as a date to find a date. In fact, I invited 2 other folks from the blind community to come out with me and just like chill, right?
You just saw this opportunity and you're like,
yeah,
I don't care who it's with. I'm going to fly plane.
It was like $50.
And
I just thought, that's affordable. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into, but hell, let's just give it a try.
Yeah.
And I show up and these planes take off on grass because they're little ultra glide planes. And my pilot comes up to me and he's a wheelchair user. And I was like, what? I'm so confused because I was so early in disability that I was like, well, how do you do this? Right.
Yeah.
So it was really great. Once we got into the plane, he had adaptable hand controls for him to fly the plane. But then once we were in the plane, I was able to take over some of those controls and fly. So of course I didn't do any of the takeoff or landing, but I got to fly over the White Rock Pier And it was, I wish I could say that the view was beautiful, but
but it was a normal
just,
Vancouver day.
right. It was
Yeah.
just this really cool experience to be able to say this blind girl flew a plane.
That's so cool. Again, another form of adapting the space to allow anyone to participate. That's so amazing to me. Just it's almost innovative, hey?
Well, not only that, but when this little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic, became a reality in our lives, the theater shut down. There was no more live theater. The curtains were closed, and so Vocal Eye had to pivot quite quickly, and then turned to our friend Zoom, which was a fairly accessible platform for folks, and we join now every Wednesday to share accessible arts with the blind community. Now, everybody's welcome to come, but we make sure that stuff is described and we have special guests. And so it's really made accessible for folks who are blind and partially sighted to experience all sorts of different kinds of art over a virtual medium. And we have folks that join us from all across Turtle Island or Canada, all across the United States, some folks that have joined us from Japan and Australia and New Zealand. So we have built community through the pandemic over this platform, and it's, free of charge, and you don't have to worry about transportation or whether you have to get a meal while you're out. And when you want to maybe try some art form that you're not familiar with, it's a good place, right? It's like, I don't need to go spend $200 on an opera ticket because I might hate it. Yeah. I can check it out on the Vocal Eye platform and then discover that I actually didn't know anything about it and I really love it. So we challenge our participants to experience all sorts of new different types of art forms, and I host those events too. So it's a bit I get to perform every Wednesday night for my community.
Nice, that's so awesome.
It's fun.
It's I have a similar feeling of how I got to my spot, and just being able to be in the community that I want to be in with the people that care and they want to be a part of something and appreciate everyone involved. There's the ego is often removed from these situations, whereas at least in music for myself, is you'll find yourself in a room of musicians and everyone's egos fighting each other. Whereas in a room of musicians that might have a disability, there's that level of empathy and understanding and collaboration. So the quote unquote vibe is a lot different.
Isn't that interesting how that happens within the disability community? There's this I got your back kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that about my community. And I really love the opportunity that I get to work artistically with the disability community in any way. Like the work that I've done with Real Wheels when we did Comedy on Wheels and Wheel Voices Tune In. Like Comedy on Wheels was a stage production and we all wrote it as a group. And it was fantastic. And then, we had another stage production planned, Wheel Voices Tune In, and then pandemic hit. So we did that online. And again, we all wrote that together as well. And there's some real camaraderie, some real, shooting the breeze that happens when you get together with your community and just talking about all the strange things that happen to you out in the world, you know? And then you make a comedy piece out of it.
That's so awesome. Yeah. And then what about that other production from Real Wheels? It was Sequence, right?
Sequence, yeah. Sequence was, so Real Wheels does community productions and they also do professional productions. So Sequence was a professional production. So they follow sort of the Actors Equity Union rules. And I was playing a character that was losing their sight. So I was a blind actor playing a blind character. And the funniest thing about that particular show was very, very complicated scientifically, because the character was Professor Guzman and was like some kind of genetic scientist. It was way, way above my pay grade, I'll tell you that much. But what was so interesting about that performance for me, so 2 actors with disability and 2 able-bodied actors, so an integrated cast, was that out of all of the actors, I had more props, more movement, more, I don't want to say more lines, but it was an 80-minute play with no intermission. And I was everywhere all over that stage. I was writing stuff on blackboards and I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to write so people can read what I'm writing? Like there were all these sort of odd challenges to navigate, but it was a fantastic production. And it was at a stage in my hometown here in North Vancouver. So I got to feel like I was like performing for my community in my own backyard as well.
Yeah. Putting on for the community. Yeah.
That's right.
That's so awesome. So let's kind of rewind a bit. Maybe get a bit more into the kind of life with sight loss and the transitions. So when did it start to become apparent and something that you knew, I have to deal with this now? Well,
for me, my sight loss happened all in one swoop, pretty much. So it wasn't a degenerative condition. I went in for a routine surgery pretty much and came out with complications of that, which was retinal detachments. And they weren't able to reattach those retinas once they had come off. So I had lost one eye. And then after I had lost the one eye, like I proceeded with life as air quotes normal. I drove my car to work every day. I adapted differently. Because I still had 20/20 vision out of my other eye, right? And then when the second retina detached and I went in for that to be reattached, I woke up and things were very fuzzy and very hazy. And my doctor pretty much said to me, well, give it time. You have a year to heal. So I literally didn't do anything for that year. In fact, I was told that I had to sleep with pretty much my face down so that the retinas would kind of float to the back of the eyes to try and keep it attached. So I had to eat face down. I had to walk face down. I had to sleep face down. It was a very uncomfortable year, I'll say.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then after that year, like I decided I'm not going to make any major decisions. Work gave me a leave of absence, which was great. I left my car on the driveway, which I wasn't going to, make any big decisions about anything until after that year was up. And after that year was up, I realized that nothing had actually changed, but that I had just gotten used to this new level of sight. Right. Because in the meantime, you have to live your life, right? You have to figure out how to brush your teeth just like you did before. And so you start to adapt without even really noticing it. And then it was after that I literally got into my car and I tried to drive it. And I went around the block and I went, nope, this is not safe. So it's a good thing I brought somebody with me so that they could drive it back around the block. But it was the moment that I knew that, okay, selling the car means that this is a reality for me. And now I have to figure out what I do next. Like I said, I was 24 years old. I was not, in a place where I could retire, live off a pension or anything. So that wasn't going to happen. And then it was really about trying to connect with resources, trying to learn how to use a screen reader on your computer and do things differently. And we're talking everything. Everything is done differently, from how you cut your food to, how you label your shampoo and conditioner bottles from each other. Like everything is different when you lose your sight. Even trying to pick socks that match in the morning. It's like, then you realize, well, you just have all one color socks, or you get a sock sorter,
right.
But it's when you don't have those tools, that seems insurmountable. But once you get those tools, you're like, okay, this is easy. I put an elastic band around my shampoo and not around my conditioner. And then I know which one's which. Right. So it's these simple sort of MacGyver solutions that really make everyday life just a little bit easier to navigate.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how were you going to figure out the difference between shampoo and conditioner? And rubber band, absolutely genius.
Right. So simple. I mean, you could do that for salt and pepper. You could do that for just about anything. Although I have to say, I tried doing it once with medications, and I take, I'm a walking pharmacy.
Yeah.
So I've got so many medication bottles that it was too many elastics to try and remember, okay, 1 band means this, 2 bands means that, 3 bands means this. But, they have a talking prescription reader called a script talk. And so I just touch my prescription bottle to the reader and it tells me the doctor, the dosage, the side effects, all of that stuff,
You're
when
kidding.
I can renew it. So, again, you find the resources and then you realize that it's really very doable. Again, inconvenient. Yeah, for sure. But it's doable.
So you mentioned, you kind of mentioned Braille, except it was
Yeah.
a little more
In a dream
a little more
scheme.
horrific. Yes, but was that something you learned quick?
You know, I do not read Braille.
Oh,
Braille is something that folks who are born with blindness or maybe lose their sight very early in age use as their first form of literacy. And so because I was somebody who was fluent in the English language and reading text before I lost my sight, I gravitated more to speech access
right.
as opposed to Braille. I will say that I can read some letters of the alphabet. And so that can be useful for labeling things like, for example, salt and pepper, S&P.
Yep.
So that could be useful for that, but I could not sit down and read a paragraph in Braille. I could
Right.
For me, it hasn't been, the speech has been so accessible for me that it hasn't been brought into my everyday practice, which is why the Braille dream is so interesting to me.
I was going to say, maybe you need to talk to someone about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think maybe I just need to write a sketch and like send it into Saturday Night Live and see if I can perform it. Because it was the most hilarious thing to wake up from that dream and be like, what? What do you mean the organs weren't labeled in Braille? How does that? So there you go. The inner minds of Amy and Mandy.
Yes. And then, so were there any like social kind of resources you reached out to when you decided, okay, this is life now? And like, were there any like programs that you got involved in, or, people that were now a part of your life to help you out?
Yeah, I had originally reached out to the CNIB, Canadian National Institute for the Blind, which you get referred to right away by the medical system. And there was a program, actually, it was an audition for a commercial. They were looking for blind actors for a commercial. I did not book that commercial, by the way. But I was there in a room with a bunch of other blind women that were also auditioning for this commercial. And I met a certain someone who's very special to me, and she invited me to Dragon Boat.
Cool.
And so I got on a dragon boat with a bunch of other blind folks. And from that moment on, she kind of brought me into her circle of friends, which was a bunch of blind folks. And I learned pretty darn quickly how valuable it was to have community. And then really my first theater experience back was I was at a Real Wheels show called Sexy Voices. And I was sitting in the audience. It was Vocal I Described. And I was sitting in the audience. And it was the first time I had seen people with disabilities on stage. And I was like, wait a minute. If they're doing this, how come I'm not doing this? And so that's how I got involved with Real Wheels. It was like right after that show, I reached out and I said, "Wow, I'm an actor too. Take me, take
Please.
me."
Yeah.
And now I'm the president of their board.
Yeah.
So,
It's happened quick. Yep.
Yep, it happened. I love Real Wheels and I love what they do and their mandate. And it just gives me more opportunity to create, right? So any opportunity I get to create, I'm all for it.
Well, I think we'll now end on this last kind of question. I ask it kind of to everyone that comes on, and it's a pretty basic one. It's, what advice would you have for, people that have sight loss or any disability in general that are looking to make a jump into something new?
I think the best advice that I can give is, one, find community. Find others that are experiencing something similar to you, that are doing what you want to do, and learn how they've done it, right? Talk to them about it, find resources from them. I find that you will find better resources from community members than you will from organizations, because community members talk to each other and they develop tactics and techniques and adaptations that maybe an organization knows, but then you're also socializing in a different way. And I think that's like the golden nugget to doing something. And then I would say, take that little thing in your brain that says, you can't do this, nobody wants you to do this, and just do it. And the truth is if you do it and it doesn't work out, that's okay. You've learned something in that experience. It's like trying new food, right? It's like if you try something and you don't like it, you don't have to eat it again. But I like to experience things, and I would just tell folks to just set aside that little thing that tells you that you can't, or that you shouldn't, that this is not for you, and give it a try and discover for yourself if it's something that you love and you want to continue, or if it's something that you're like, well, I gave that a try. I think I'll move on to the next thing. And that is okay. You are good enough just as you are.
Nice. That perfect. I hope many people resonate with that. I know I'm resonating with that right now. That was amazing. So thank you so much, Amy. It was great to have you on the podcast today.
Really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.